What was the please stop school presentation that you witnessed?
Silent scan.
Was in a video/film making class in high school. One group of guys did a parody of those Gatorade commercials, where the athlete's sweat is colored like Gatorade, but it was a sweaty guy jerking off. Apparently there was a Gatorade cum shot, but the teacher just turned that shit off immediately, before it got that far.
Silent scan.
Presentation on WWII. Student had just discovered all the neat transitions you can use between slides, and decided to use a different one each slide. They use the flashing heart transition between a photo slide of Massgrave and a photo slide of Hitler.
Silent scan.
Opioid awareness, literally a few months ago. Started with them blasting the entirety of the Disturbed cover of The Sound of Silence, while a slideshow of images containing sad stock photos with the watermark all over, random shots of really dark nighttime photos, and tons of poorly photoshopped drug images trudged on ever so slowly. Then, two women told us the harrowing stories of how their sons died of opioid overdoses. Incredibly emotional, several people cried. Real downer, basically. Then, a D agent comes up and tries to act all bad cop. He calls us, an assembly of high school students, grades 9 to 12, ducking morons. The principal was not pleased. He is then followed by a nurse who was there to tell us the physical effects of opioid addiction and withdrawals and all that, and she did talk about that, but the whole time she was running around practically screaming jokes and doing shitty over the top gags trying to be the comic relief. In an opioid assembly, where two women shared the stories of how their children died. What the duck was she doing being that loud and crazy? Everyone came out of the whole thing with a general attitude of yeah duck opioids, but also duck that whole presentation.
Silent scan.
The ones in college I was in my Spanish class and our desks were in a U shape. I was on the very end of the U. So some guy's giving a presentation. He is standing behind the podium. Gets a boner. I'm on the side and no one is opposite, so I can see it. Dude just kept going on and on and on. I think he was trying to outlast the boner. He ended up getting it down before he had to sit down. Was like a 10-minute presentation that only needed to be like 3 minutes though. Edit. Presentation was in Spanish too. The fear boner.
Silent scan.
During nursing school a guy decided to use My Little Pony figures as props to a seminar room of about 100 people. He told the class that he would refer to himself as his pony name for the duration. Don't remember what it was. Also, not that this is relevant, but he wore a black leather trench coat, and it was pretty hot in the room, yet he never took it off. Cringe. Edit. He wasn't a student, he came in to do a talk about epilepsy and his experience with healthcare. We got to review them at the end and I gave him a good score because he actually had a lot of interesting things to say about his condition, even if it was cringy.
Silent scan.
Environmental science. For our final project in the class we were allowed to talk about. Dude decides to do his project on global cooling. Buddy was up there for 7 minutes explaining to the class how the earth has been getting colder and colder, and how it's eventually going to cause problems to other species. Teacher was really passionate about this class, and you could see her squirming in her seat the whole way through the presentation. Whole thing was a big WTF. His sources were online forums.
Silent scan.
In speech 101 in college we had to pick a children's book and voice act each character. That was it. That was the entire assignment. Well, one student decided to take it to the next level. He chose a Berenstain Bear book and decided to not only do voice acting for every single one of the characters, but also act it out. It was physically uncomfortable to watch this guy scramble around the room and pretend to be bears and other animals. It was not well done. It was awful.
Silent scan.
It's me. I did this. I cringe about it to this day, nearly 20 years later. I was 16 and in high school. My high school was going to do a spring talent show. I wanted to be in the talent show and show off my talents. The problem was, my actual talents are not ones that I could show off at a talent show. So I decided to try singing. I have never sung in my life. I have never had voice lessons. I was in my prime weeb stage and chose an anime song to sing. I didn't know any actual Japanese, I had just memorized the lyrics from hearing the song so many times. Luckily I didn't make it past auditions, but several people saw an overweight girl in a Sailor Moon shirt try to sing Butterfly despite having never done any singing or voice training ever in her life. Nearly 20 years later, and remembering it keeps me awake at night.
Silent scan.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to get even more awesome content. Come on, it just takes 1 second.
Silent scan.
We had this senior talent show that a few male students could sign up for. No idea why it was only guys, or how the few people even got nominated for it, and they all had to do their own act. Some sang, some danced, some put on a funny skit. Possibilities were endless. Well, each year someone who never got told they weren't good at singing would end up on stage. One time this guy did the evolution of boy band songs, and it was just below average singing for, no joke, 15 minutes straight. Bonus skit that I'm glad didn't stop, because it was hilarious. One guy did a wrestling skit with different movie characters and my friend was the announcer. When Indiana Jones got into the ring my friend announced it's the BDSM bad boy himself, and somehow that slipped by all the school staff members, and made it into the DVDs the school sold. Another friend of mine sang Disney princess songs while wearing a Sonic hat and got second place and at least 3 girls gave him their number.
Silent scan.
I've told this on Reddit a few times, but it's truly unforgettable. Smart kid in the class was giving a deeply sourced PowerPoint presentation on religion in Europe. He opens up his files, proceeds to click on his project named N*GGER. He says clearly I wasn't really paying any attention when I named my file. He gives the presentation. He stutters and sweats bullets while we watch in utter disbelief. The word is sitting there on the top of the file heading the whole time. This was during a study abroad semester while attending a cultural communication class. He had to rot in his own shit after that.
Silent scan.
We were supposed to have Arnold Schwarzenegger come to our school sometime around 1999 or 2000. Principal was hyping it up for weeks. Then about 4 days before his arrival it was announced on Friday that he wasn't coming. Fast forward to Monday during morning announcements it's announced he's changed his mind and is coming to our school tomorrow as planned. Come Tuesday morning everyone is excited, we're all amped to meet the Terminator. A handful of parents even came with VHS copies of his movies, posters, etc. We're all going to our gym/auditorium, taking our seats. Principal takes the stage, takes the moment to make some announcements, award honor roll, perfect attendance, etc. Finally she starts hyping up around Schwarzenegger. Everyone is excited and on edge when she basically says here's Arnie, and it's the vice principal in a leather jacket holding a shotgun, not a toy one either, and spends 30 to 40 minutes trying to hype us up for FC80 all the while doing the absolute worst impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger I've ever heard. Once we realized Arnold wasn't there people start shouting, screaming at the principals for lying to us, along with some of the parents who came to this. I do hope someone has footage of this meltdown of a bunch of K5 kids shouting and screaming at the principals because Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't come to our school. Because I clearly remember 2 to 3 people having camcorders. As for some of the questions, Arnold was scheduled, but cancelled last minute on not only my school, but my cousin's who he was supposed to go to on Wednesday. Instead he only went to one school in my city, which I don't remember which one ATM, but I'll add it, if I remember it. Yes, the principals apologized the next day, and the vice principal changed schools the following school year. I have absolutely no idea why he thought bringing a shotgun was a good idea, but I think he was attempting to look the part, which considering his massive gut, really didn't help.
Silent scan.
It was my sophomore year English class, this kid who was reading his essay in front of the class, and started to stumble over some of the words. The teacher recognized the words and found the essay the kid plagiarized and started helping him read it. The kid didn't understand what was happening and just thanked the teacher and kept reading.
Silent scan.
Someone in my class did a book report on the dictionary. The teacher was pissed. All of us students thought it was hilarious. Never heard the end of the presentation.
Silent scan.
Psychology class. Our final was to research and to a presentation on a mental illness. One group chose necrophilia. Started with the first slide saying, "Let's crack open a cold one."
Silent scan.
Our gay principal came out to the podium and mentioned people drifting in the parking lot and said the complaints have been a pain in his ass. Someone in the audience shouted, "At least you're used to it." We heard a gunshot in the school that day. It was apparently unrelated.
Silent scan.
Final presentation for our final class as a senior in college. It was awkwardly placed as a 7-9:30 on Thursday evenings. We had to do a final presentation about topic that was related to our major in simplistic terms. A kid did his on weed. It was about mass producing weed, like a scientific look of how this would work, which would have been fine, but about halfway through he got off topic and started preaching how weed isn't bad and people need to accept it. This went on for about 10 minutes. We kept waiting for the teacher to stop him, but she sat there patiently. He eventually moved to another slide and somehow brought it back to the same subject. I eventually left to use the bathroom because I was cringing so hard.
Silent scan.
We were doing presentations on sexual diseases and dysfunctions in my health class. One of the more class clown students did a project on bestiality. He cleared it with the teacher, who could see that he was being very serious about how bestiality impacts sex for people. He got through his entire presentation and opened up the floor for questions. The first question was related to a statistic from his presentation wherein he cited some percentage of people who lose their virginity to household pets. The question was from another class clown, and he asked, "So, did you lose your virginity to an animal?" Without missing a beat, dude says, "I dunno man, your mom is a beast." And then question time was over.
Silent scan.
Congratulations, you reached the end of this awesome video. Now, like and subscribe, like we talked earlier, come on.
Silent scan.